Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come to listen to Viking. As per the introduction by Michael, I've got a lot of gold experience. Prior to that, also have some porphyry copper gold project experience as well. But yes, as he said, we're here to talk about vanadium. So Viking's a battery metals explorer focused on the critical mineral vanadium, and I'm going to talk to you about our CANEGRASS battery minerals project, which is located here in WA. Usual disclaimer slides, so please take the opportunity to read those at your own leisure. So I want to first cover off the investment highlights for Viking Mines. Why invest in Viking? Well, firstly, it's exposure to the critical mineral vanadium. If you were here this morning and you heard the talk by AVL, they set a very good scene for the future outlook for vanadium, which is a less well-known battery mineral. There's only 3 talkers, I think, presenters at the conference today who are going to be talking about vanadium, and I'm one of them. So vanadium traditionally has a major use in steel, which that sector is very strong, but the battery sector is growing substantially. There's also within our project upside credits and opportunity for nickel, copper and cobalt, which I'll talk about later. The project comes with an existing large mineral resource with huge upside potential, and I'll cover off in my slides as to why we believe that we're going to see a substantial increase in the resource growth, and most importantly, as high-grade zones which have yet to be fully determined. Only 20% of the horizon which we've got in the tenure that we're exploring has really been explored and drilled, with the remainder of it being highly prospective and outcropping at surface. We're not doing this for the first time. We're following in the footsteps of some credentialed peers. Australian Vanadium I mentioned this morning. There's also Technology Metals. They have projects that are 150 kilometres north of ours, up near Meekatharra, and that's a lever for us to pull. We can take advantage of the work that they've done previously and move forward at what we believe will be a more rapid pace than they previously did. In terms of management, we've got a demonstrated record of discovery and development. It was just mentioned there earlier in terms of gold projects, but I've also been involved in a number of scoping studies and the like, and a number of projects globally. So as a quick corporate overview, and the opportunity that stretches on from the investment highlights here, is Viking has 1 billion shares on issue, and we're currently trading about 1 to 1.1 cents, so we're capped at that 10 to 11 mil mark. At the end of the last quarter, we had 3.8 million in the bank, which leaves an EV of 6.4 on the slide here. The joker in the pack that I keep referring to, and we can't put this down in our cash balance, but the company used to have a gold project in Ghana, which we sold a number of years ago. We didn't receive full payment for this, and we've been chasing it through the courts for a number of years. We received $3 million US in cash a couple of years ago. There's still some sums outstanding, and as recently as January, we received a judgment from the court in Ghana that 4 million Australian is due to be paid by the defendants. So we still have to secure these funds, but now that we've got a legal right to pursue it, we can start that process. If and when we bring that money in, that reduces the EV to only $2 million, which essentially makes it a huge investment opportunity for anyone looking to invest in Viking. Secondly is the uplift in the share price. The companies that I mentioned before, AVL and TMT, etc., they have market caps ranging from $75 to $125 million. They've completed DFS. That's the pathway that we see for Viking. So there's a huge opportunity to see shareholder appreciation through buying Viking stock. So one of the main reasons we're here talking today is due to vanadium's role in decarbonisation and the vanadium redox flow battery. As I've said, steel forms a baseload supply for vanadium into that sector, but the battery sector is growing substantially. As recently as a few years ago, only 1% of vanadium worldwide production was going into the battery sector. As recently as last year, around 6%, and forecast for this year to be 10%. I've seen other forecasts going even further. Within the next 20 years, that the vanadium consumption going into the battery will actually exceed the steel supply. This is going to provide a substantial deficit in vanadium worldwide, which sees the need for more projects coming along in this niche market. Why VRFBs? Well, VRFBs have a huge advantage over lithium-ion batteries, that they have large fixed-scale energy storage applications. So the likes of in residential areas, remote sites, they have the unique benefit of being able to charge and discharge an almost infinite number of times, which sees forecast battery life 20 to 30 years, unlike the lithium-ion counterparts, which need to be changed on a much more frequent basis. The vanadium electrolyte at the end of the life of the battery is fully recyclable, so the value of that vanadium is still retained. And as I mentioned, the VRFB sector is forecast to grow 9-fold, as shown on the graph on the right, which is some research done by Guidehouse Insights, and that can be obtained off the Vanitec website, which shows that the vanadium consumption going into the battery sector alone to grow 9-fold by the early 2030s. So about the project itself, well, CANEGRASS is in the right rocks, the right jurisdiction and the right location. As we all know, WA is the best place in the world to be mining and exploring for resources, and this is proven by the ranking in the Fraser Index, which was completed last year, and we expect to hold the same place this year too. We're in what's called the Vanadium Triangle, or that's the name touted by the guys at AVL. There's a number of substantial vanadium projects within a few 100-kilometre radius of our project. Location-wise, 620 kilometres northeast of Perth, near a township of Mount Magnet, sealed roads within 20 kilometres of the project, as well as a gas pipeline also nearby. So there's a lot of metrics which will see this project have a lot of benefit. Moving on to the project itself, there's a map here that shows the magnetic geophysics and the tenement position, and the pink dashed line, which I can highlight up, that runs up around this area, that's the horizon which the vanadium is hosted within. And the projects I'll talk about are the Fold Nose and KINKS resources, which combine to 79 million tonnes at 0.64% V2O5. That equates to over 1.1 billion pounds of vanadium, and the current vanadium price is sitting around $14 Australian a pound. So there's huge in situ value that needs to be assessed, determined, and to see if it can be released. We've undertaken rapid advancements since taking this project on. We acquired it at the beginning of the year through a farming arrangement where we can see it's ultimately getting to 100% with $4 million exploration spend and $1.25 million in cash payment. Since the start of the year, we've undertaken drilling, geophysical surveys, heritage surveys, and this is our preliminary work prior to the main drilling program, which is going to occur later this quarter, starting late May. Historical recoveries in the limited test work completed previously have shown vanadium up to 90% can be recovered from the rock, and that's going to be a key focus for our next step in our activity, working on the metallurgical test work, which will come from the drill samples that we collect. So zooming in a bit more closer on the horizon, on the image here, the pink dots are all a series of surface rock chip samples, essentially confirming that the outcropping mineralization continues across the area. We have Fold Nose in the southwest at the bottom down here, and the hashed area is really the limits of the resource that's been determined at the moment. That connects through, following the horizon, up through to the KINKS resource. And again, there's a significant opportunity which I'll discuss in a few slides. The KINKS South target, located here, is a significant opportunity. Sparse drilling completed by WMC in the 80s yielded some substantial results, which haven't been followed up in the last 40 years, and we believe that's got an opportunity to carry forwards into growing this resource. So focusing in on the Fold Nose area, the two things I really want you to take away from this. The orange hashed area at the bottom, that's where the outcropping resource is currently modelled, and this is the model that we inherited on the project. The blue outline, that's the subsurface extents of the resource. On walking through the project area, we've discovered 1.7 kilometres of outcropping mineralisation that's not connected to the resource, which is currently sitting over 80 metres at depth, through 550 metres of surface exposure, and then continuing a further 1.4 kilometres to the north with rock chip samples exceeding 1.4% that we have collected, demonstrating that there is an opportunity to increase the resource in strike length on outcropping position by 6.5 times plus. This is a great opportunity. There's no drilling being conducted in this area here, but the geology definitely connects through to it at depth. The same goes for the south. This is going to be a major focus. So we can see from this, we haven't put any numbers out as to an exploration target size or increase, but we can see substantial growth. We're not looking for tonne's sake. What we're after is grade. And we can see from the drilling that's been completed, and a couple of examples here, 8 metres at 1%, 18 at 1, and 36 at 0.7, that there are good grades to be had from this project. This is what we see on surface. So when we say outcrop, as a geologist, this is pretty decent outcrop for WA, enough to at least have your lunch on. So we sat there, had lunch, seen a couple of other outcrops. The map on the top right, that just shows this is the limit of the resource model. Here's an outcrop, 1.25% vanadium, big enough to grow trees on. Here's another one. Again, 200 plus metres from the limits of the resource, that's 80 metres below surface, with grades up to 1.34%. There is immediate opportunity to grow this resource. It doesn't stop there. We go up to the KINKS-GROWTH target areas, which is up in the northeast. Same story. This is the outcropping mineralisation in the model as it stands in orange here, and this is the resource model limits. All bar one of these drill holes you see highlighted here with substantial grades, including 15 metres at 0.9, 24 metres at 1. These holes were drilled subsequent to the last resource model update and haven't been included into the resource. We will be bringing those in with additional drilling and upgrading the resource. Given the average grade of the resource in that area currently sits at 0.57, I have a firm belief that we're going to see an improvement in the grade. We have the same story with sampling at surface and a resource model that stops at depth that we can connect to in the south area. We offset on a fault and we move into the area I mentioned before, Kinks South, drilled initially in the 80s. Hits up to 28 meters at 0.9% V2O5, 22 meters at 0.7, including 7 at 1%. These are grades that our peers are putting through in their feasibility studies, I might add. It gives us a high confidence over this target. Again, walked along the outcrop. Simple geology, we put this into a simple model. We took the outcrop measurements of 20 degrees at surface and we just projected to see where they would go. We find 550 meters to the north, a drill hole conducted in 2008 that wasn't targeting this area, intersected 66 meters at 0.74, within which there's 16 meters at 1%. A historical hole yielded 28 meters at 0.9. We recently completed an initial drilling program to ensure that our tenement commitments were met prior to the large program we've got planned, and drilled through this area. And the pink zone here is where we encountered 17 meters of massive magnetite. We believe this is going to yield some significant grades, and more importantly, it's confirming the model is sitting where we expect it to be. I should add, there is magnetite in the rest of the hole, it's just not the massive magnetite, and that's likely to yield the lower grades that we see in the other holes in the area that are around that 0.3 to 0.6%. What does this look like from the air? I bought a drone, I like to play with it, it's a whole new thing that you can do these days. Sent it up in the air, had a look, we're looking due west. The blue hashed and shaded area, this is where we've traced the outcrop on surface, resampled it earlier this year, got grades up to 1.45%, and these are the grades that we've seen in the drilling over that 1.1 kilometre area. I should stress there is no resource in this area yet. This is something we'll be planning on drilling a couple of thousand metres into during our May and June drilling programme. It was very simple when we're drilling. Basically, when the rock turned dark grey to black, that was when we were hitting the massive magnetite. And we've got 17 meters of it here. Any of you are interested afterwards, if you want to come to the booth, we've got the chip tray there. The takeaway is you put a magnet to it, the chips jump out of the tray. It's massive magnetite. So I'm very encouraged by this whole area, this target, and we should see results from this initial drilling program in April. The one thing to add, and I haven't talked about much yet, and I'll cover in some later slides, is that we identified chalcopyrite in the samples. Whilst they're not a mine in their own right, we've seen grades up to 1,000 ppm in some of the historical drilling. And importantly, in this hole, we actually saw samples of chalcopyrite. And there's potentially a mechanism to recover that chalcopyrite through the process option, as I'll discuss separately. So to expand on that point, again, doing the field work, walking along the ground, kicking the rocks, swatting away the flies, we can see copper oxides on surface. The bottom image shows some copper oxides that we saw while traversing the ground, and the top image shows the chalcopyrite and the pyrite that we see intermixed with the magnetite in the drilling we just completed. There's a few examples here in the drill hole database of the resource, of the numbers, which I won't go through in individual detail at the moment, but it's fair to say that there's opportunity for nickel, copper and cobalt from this project. The pathway to getting that value out would be on the processing. When you do a magnetic separation, you take the reject, the tail, and you undertake flotation on that, and then you can look to recover it. That's what we'll be undertaking on our test work later this year. I just want to briefly mention the peers who've highlighted or lighted the path for us. And if you take a look at their resource values, we don't need hundreds of millions of tonnes. We really need to get to a reserve position of 40 to even 30 million tonnes at 1% and a bit, and we can see an economic proposition here. And the grades I've shown you in the drilling that's been completed previously demonstrate that's achievable. We believe that with the work completed by the peer group, we can fast track this project because we can learn from the work they've completed previously. On our activity, I've touched on we've done many items. The ones in green here are things we've completed within 3 months, and this is our forward program. Our main program, as I mentioned, 5,500 meters of drilling will take place in the end of the June quarter, so commencing late May, and then we should see results shortly thereafter if we continue to see turnaround at the lab behaving well. That will see a resource update later in the year. Importantly, once we've got those results, we will then be able to undertake the metallurgical test work, which will allow us to determine the metallurgical characteristics of the ore, and on the back of that work, we envisage looking at commencing a scoping study at the start of the new year. So to wrap this up, why invest in Viking Mines? Well, you get exposure to the critical battery mineral vanadium, which has got, as our project as well, copper, nickel and cobalt upside. The VRFB installations are increasing significantly globally, and there's forecast to see that vanadium will actually be more used in vanadium redox flow batteries rather than the steel sector in the decades to come. I've demonstrated to you that the substantial mineral resource growth potential. We've got extensive mapped high-grade zones seen on surface with rock chip samples outside the existing resource base, and that gives us immediate opportunity to grow the resource with the drilling that we're going to be undertaking later this year. With the rapidly advancing project and the extensive work program we've got planned, we'll see news flow. So any investors coming in should see that we will be moving this project forward, and with the drill bit, we will be continuing to grow the resource and do the test work and look at moving this project to a scoping study next year. Thank you very much.